Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Coffee with Katie. Still got my smog mug. So today's video is going to be, if you like this, try that. And so I'm basically just going to be going through several books where I'm gonna put one book up and I'm gonna say, if you like this book, then you should try this book and the reasons for that. So without further ado, let's just go. So we're gonna kick it off with my favorite book of all time, Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This is kind of people describe it as like an X-Men-esque type story. It's set in kind of an urban fantasy world where people have supernatural abilities, but you can only get these abilities if you've basically almost died or died and been brought back to life. There's like a certain formula for it, and the way your ability manifests also affects that, or can affect that, or can be related, I guess, to how you died / brought back. And it's a really interesting story. There's a lot of morally gray characters, and there's a lot of who's the villain, who truly is the villain. Are they all villains? Is somebody more of a villain than the other? And there's just a lot of really interesting interpersonal relationships that happen with that. It follows these two best friends that are now arch enemies, and you don't know why. You know that in the beginning of the story, but you don't know how it unfolds. It does like some time skips, so it'll be like present day, 10 years ago, yesterday, today, kind of a situation. So it leads you through the crumbling of this relationship and how they became arch enemies and how it continues from there. And it is a freaking brilliant book. I loved it, every second of it. I was enthralled. I couldn't put it down. Like, not many books grip me the way that book has gripped me. And I love morally gray characters, but this wasn't just like, I don't know, I feel like when you hear morally gray, you like it, but you want this like sexy fae man morally gray character in your like romance or something. This is not that, but it is extremely morally gray. Like, all of the characters are morally gray, and I love it, which I'm sure you know if you've been on this channel, because I've probably raved about it. And I've also raved about this other book, but I think if you loved Vicious, then you should try All of Us Villains by Amanda Foody and Christine Lynn Herman. This has a lot of the same elements of the villainous aspects and the morally gray aspects, because it is going into a killing tournament. People describe this book as a Hunger Games with magic, which I understand why they do that. There's a little bit more to it than that. So there are these, I don't remember how many families, there's like 5 to 7 families, I can't remember. But basically there's these families in this city. Every, I think 50 years it is, every time that there's a blood moon, there is a killing tournament. And whoever wins this tournament wins the use of high magic for their family. So when you have high magic, you can do a lot more powerful spells. You can have a lot more strength in your spells. You can do more spell work. There's a lot less limitations if you have high magic, because if your family's not one of the ones that has high magic, you have to work a lot harder at getting this magic, using it, etc. So they all enter into this tournament, and they know that the winner will win high magic for their family, which is obviously a big advantage, especially if you're going to get it for the next 50 years before somebody else can take it from you. So it's a huge advantage and just an insane thing that everybody wants to walk away with. And there's also this like book that has come out about the victors, the people that are going to be competing, the champions, I think it is, the champions. And there's this book that comes out. It's been mysteriously written. Nobody knows who it was written by, but it's delving into the stories of all of these families and how this person or this family was painted as the hero, and this family was painted as the villain. This family was painted as weak, what have you. And that playing into how all of the characters interact with each other, and also the characters themselves deciding who they are and who they aren't, whether they're buying into the story or not. It was really, really interesting to see how all of the characters play out, how some of them accept that they're the villain and they just like lean into that, how some of them don't want this destiny that is thrust upon them, how some of them want to find a different way to figure this out, some of them think there's no way out, and having to make decisions in this tournament, whether you live or die, or whether somebody else lives or dies. So I think with all of the morally gray aspects, the villainous aspects, and the hard choices that you have to make to survive, I think if you like Vicious, you will like All of Us Villains. The next one we're going to look at is Carnival. So obviously, if you've been on my channel for pretty much any amount of time, you know I love Carnival, the universe of Carnival, and Stephanie Garber as an author. So one of the reasons I love Carnival is that it's a very magical and whimsical story. And I say that a little hesitantly because it is extremely magical and whimsical and fun and just mysterious and cool and magical and like all of that stuff, but it's not a light story. Like there's some really heavy aspects to it. There's some pretty gruesome aspects to it, but it's not like horror, or it's not like super deep or crazy like some adult fantasy sci-fi is. But there are like some sinister elements to it, and I really enjoyed that. I loved the balance of it. People describe this as like a circus. Let me just tell you, this is one of my biggest pet peeves. It is not a circus book. It is not a magical circus. The idea of Carnival is that it's pitched as a game or almost a show, but you get to participate, so it's more of a game. So you show up to Carnival, wherever it is, if you're invited, you get tickets to be invited, and you play. And if you're playing, there's something you're trying to solve all of these like riddles, mysteries, puzzles, whatever, to win a prize, whatever that prize is that year. You're following these two sisters, and the one sister convinces the older sister, who's very cautious and doesn't want to get in trouble, to participate in this game. They like kind of make sure she participates in the game. She ends up going to the island to participate in Carnival, but her sister disappears and she's trying to find her, doesn't know what's going on, but she has to start playing the game where she's gonna get like locked out. And then she finds out that her sister has been kidnapped and she has to play this game and win to find her. And the winner gets a wish. So it's really fun. I enjoyed this series so much. It like really changed my life because it became my favorite series. And I absolutely adore it. It's, like I said, magical, whimsical, but sinister. There's a lot of dark elements to this. There's a lot of mystery. It was just really, really cool. And I loved the way this world was written and how it was like delved into. And I would say if you love Carnival, if you like Carnival, then you should try Hotel Magnifique by Emily J. Taylor. Now, this book has not gotten a lot of positive reviews, surprisingly, because I loved it. I thought it was really fun. It's a standalone. That's a plus, or it can be to some people, but I really, really enjoyed this book. It had a similar tone to Carnival. One of the criticisms I saw was that people were saying it's like copying and pasting Carnival, and I have no idea how they're getting that. There are like a couple of elements that are similar, but it is not the same, so don't listen to that. But the reason I really liked Hotel Magnifique is the premise is there are two sisters, so that's probably where some of the parallels come from. There are two sisters, and they really have always dreamt of staying at Hotel Magnifique, which is this like magical traveling hotel. So it appears and you can stay in it, and then it'll travel around, it'll like disappear, and it'll be in another location, and it's just this magical thing. And in this world, magic is seen as dangerous and forbidden. So if you have it, you're like immediately ostracized. And the only people that can use magic work at Hotel Magnifique. And it's run by this like powerful magician, which is why all these magical, amazing things can happen inside the confines of the hotel. But it is deemed okay and safe, but that is the only place you can experience it. And as such, it is very hard or expensive to stay there. And so her and her sister end up finding jobs to work at the hotel so that they can experience it. The people that end up staying there have to sign this contract that says that they will forfeit all of their memories once they leave. So once people actually leave, they have no idea what happened when they were staying there. And it's slowly unraveling as they find out more about this hotel and the staff and things that are going on, that it's a lot more sinister than it seems and dangerous. And I would say that Hotel Magnifique is more sinister and dangerous than Carnival, but I loved it. And just how it all plays out, the things that are happening, it's like equally magical and amazing and just like, oh, that's so cool, cotton candy clouds, like type of a feeling. But then it's like horrifying and tense and you're like, oh no, what's gonna happen? So I think that if you enjoyed Carnival and kind of the feeling that that book gives you, this book gives you a similar feeling, but it's also very dark. And I thought it was done really well. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to reading more of what this author comes out with because Hotel Magnifique was a hit for me. So I think if you like Carnival, you will like Hotel Magnifique. The next one will be A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. So this is a kind of true crime situation where you're following Pip, who is in high school, and she's writing her senior project on a murder-suicide type situation that happened in her high school with 2 of the students, but it has never been solved. So one of the people went missing, and they assume her to be dead, and they assume her boyfriend killed her because he was found as dead as well, but they thought it was like a suicide situation. But she doesn't believe that this student would have been capable of killing his girlfriend and then killing himself. So she starts to investigate this to kind of prove this story wrong and gets into a lot of crazy trouble because of it. And it's really cool. It's a mixed media type of audiobook. So the audiobook is fantastic. And she's interviewing all these people and piecing together the story. But if you like the mystery elements and the true crime elements of this, then I think you should give Stalking Jack the Ripper a chance. It is not fantasy. It's not set in a fantastical world, like it's set in our world, but there are elements that are stretched to where you're like, that probably wouldn't ever happen, probably couldn't ever happen. But that's the only like fantastical element of it. But it is set in like 1800s London, the first book is anyway. And they're investigating the Stalking Jack the Ripper case because the main character wants to work with cadavers and she wants to work in forensics. And so this is very frowned upon as her being a woman, but she can do it because her uncle does this. And so she ends up getting involved with her uncle and seeing the victims of Stalking Jack the Ripper and starts investigating this case. So again, if murder mystery or true crime things appeal to you, I think you would like Stalking Jack the Ripper. It delves into a lot of the murder mystery stuff, but it also has a lot of humor elements. It's scary. It can be very tense at times and gruesome at times, but there's so much like humor, and the chemistry between the main character Audrey and Thomas is so good. The banter is hilarious. Like, it was just top tier fantastic. I fell in love with these characters. I fell in love with Thomas Cresswell. And I think that if you loved Good Girl's Guide to Murder, you would also really, really enjoy Stalking Jack the Ripper because of the similar forensic true crime elements, but also the banter of Stalking Jack the Ripper I think is better, but it's also different. It's not modern day like Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but it's not, you know, high fantasy. It's still set in like 1800s London and that kind of wit. So I think you should give Stalking Jack the Ripper a shot if you liked A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. The next one we're going to talk about is going to be Red Rising by Pierce Brown. So Red Rising is a space opera, and you're following Darrow, who is a red, and in this world there is a caste system based on color. So if you're a gold, you're in the ruling class. If you're a red, you're pretty low class, like one of the lowest classes. And he is on Mars, and he's been told his whole life that he is terraforming Mars so that it can be inhabited by humans. But later it finds out that humans have been living in space for years and there's no reason for them to be doing this. And they're just being kept as slave labor and in the dark. And he's obviously very upset about this, and he ends up getting recruited by a group of rebels in the Reds to infiltrate the Golds and take them down from the inside. He undergoes the transformation to become a Gold and is trying and gets into the military academy to then eventually like go up the ranks and take the system down is the idea. And I think if you like the military aspects of Red Rising and you really like the plotting and the themes and the starships and the spaceship starships, kind of like galactic navy situation, you like the politics and the plotting and the military strategy, if you like all of that of this story, then I think you would like Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio. In my opinion, first book to first book, Empire of Silence is better than Red Rising. I loved the trilogy of Red Rising, but when you hear about the synopsis of the book and the entire first book is like one phase, you're just like, how is he going to do this in 3 books? Like, it just feels impossible. But at least with Empire of Silence, you know you're getting into a 6 or 7 book series. So you at least have a little bit more of expectation about how that plotting is going to go or how that speed is going to go. But I would say first book versus first book, I enjoyed Empire of Silence more than Red Rising, even though I really enjoy Red Rising as a whole. Empire of Silence is also a space opera, and it is also following kind of the military academy situation, but Hadrian Marlowe, the main character of Empire of Silence, has a little bit, he actually comes from somebody that is affluent, and he kind of ends up becoming somebody less, and you follow that journey as you go. I don't want to say too much about that and ruin anything, but the idea that the author gave for the series, not necessarily the first book, but for the series, is what if Anakin becoming Darth Vader was the correct choice? And so you know from the beginning that this is a villain origin story and that Hadrian is going to go dark and he's going to commit genocide of it's like thousands or millions of lives and an entire species. He eradicates them. So you know from the beginning that he's going to turn villainous and turn dark, but you don't know when. And I love that. I love villain origin stories, and even though he's not obviously turning villain, well, I don't know if it's obvious, he's not turning on the very first book, or else what would all this plot be? But it's really cool to just be able to follow his story, and it's a lot more in depth. So the pace can be a little bit slower, but I thought the pacing in Red Rising could be slow at times too. But I think, again, if you enjoy that like military strategy, betrayal, trying to stay alive, like crazy situations, if you like that, then you would like Empire of Silence. I think Empire of Silence leans more into the side where they're interacting with alien races, so there's not just the human race like there is in Red Rising. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more politics in it. So there's a lot more to delve into, and I think the author said he wrote book 6 is what he wanted to write, the story that he wanted to tell when he started the series, but he had to write all this background stuff to get to book 6. So it sounds like it's going to be super in-depth and great. I've only read the first 2, but I do really think that if you liked Red Rising, you will love Empire of Silence, and you should give it a shot. The next one will be Frostblood by Ellie Blake. I actually just read this and thought it was fantastic. You're following a Fireblood who is kind of ostracized. They've all been tried to, the Frostbloods are the ruling class, and they've tried to eradicate all of the Firebloods who have the elemental ability of fire, while the Frostbloods have the elemental ability of frost, ice, etc. And the Firebloods have basically all been eliminated except for a select few. And she is in hiding with her mother. They find out that she's a Fireblood. They kill her mother and they take her to prison. And she is saved by some Frostblood rebellion because the Frost Kingdom is very corrupt and evil, and they're just doing a lot of crazy, horrible things. So they take her to become a King's Champion and compete in this tournament against other Frostbloods so that she can infiltrate the kingdom again and take it down. The story did not go how I thought it was going to go, especially the pacing of like what you know in the synopsis versus when it actually happens. But this story was really well done. I thought it caught me by surprise. It was a 5-star read. It was so good. It's the first book in a trilogy, and I haven't finished the trilogy yet, but I was very impressed by Frostblood and loved the story and how the arc goes with the elemental magic and the training, but also the relationships between the Fire Rebel, between her and the Frostblood rebels, the kingdom, how the, I guess, mysterious threat turns out. It was just really, really good. And because she's in prison and she ends up getting rescued and trained and she's competing in these tournaments, if you like that idea and you liked this book, I think you would also really enjoy The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. These are, I should have said this at the beginning of the video, but these are obviously all by vice versa. So if you liked Empire of Silence, you should read Red Rising. If you liked Hotel Magnifique, you should read Carnival. So these are also, they can go either way, but I'm just giving you one and then giving you another to give me some sort of order. So The Prison Healer, you're following a main character who is a prison healer. She was sent to the prison at a very young age and grew up with her father there, but her father dies while she's in prison, and so she's just trying to basically survive. And one of the ways she can do that is by becoming a prison healer. She trained with her father to be a healer, and she works there, and it is a safer position because usually you die in a few years in this prison because it is so brutal and horrible. She's trying to survive as such, but she's just waiting until the rebels that she was a part of can come and rescue her. And when the rebel queen is sent to the prison, sick and unable to do anything, she's just desperately trying to keep this person alive so that the rebels can come rescue them both. But the queen is sentenced to a trial of ordeals, which means she has to compete in a tournament against all 4 elements and survive, and no one has ever survived. And she knows that this person cannot do that because she is too sick, so she volunteers to do it in her place. And if she completes these trials, they both get to walk free. And so now she has to compete in these elemental trials, and again, no one has ever survived. So the stakes are high. It is set in a prison, which is really interesting, and there's a lot of elemental magic. So I think if you liked Frostblood, you would really enjoy this and should absolutely pick it up because it was also a really highly rated read for me. And the last one we're going to talk about today is A Court of Thorns and Roses. I know like nobody's heard about this book. I couldn't even say that with a straight face. I know so many people love A Court of Thorns and Roses, and so many people want to find a book that makes them feel like that book did. And it's probably not going to happen if you like truly love that book, you know, like just like I love Carnival and nothing's going to ever top it for me. But there's things that can be similar or can bring you a similar level of enjoyment. And I think that if you really liked ACOTAR, which is you're following Feyre, who is just like a lowly village girl. She lost her family lost their fortune and they're sitting in poverty, and she has to hunt for her family to survive, and they're starving. She ends up killing a wolf who was actually a Fey shifter, and it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. So another Fey lord, they're taught the Fey are horrible and just like monsters and will like kill you immediately or eat you or something. A Fey lord comes to collect, saying that because she killed this friend of his, she owes him a debt and he must come live with her. And so she's taken back to the Fey world, which is super dangerous for humans, and she's like almost dies at every turn. And it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, so you can kind of fill in the pieces from there. But if you love that story, you love the Fae, you love the dark elements, you love the mystery, you just love all that stuff, the politics, the war, what have you. I think if you like that, then you would like Rapa Sonic by Laura Thalassa. This is also following like a dark Fae king. You're also following Callie, who is a siren. So this isn't high fantasy like ACOTAR, this is more urban fantasy and a portal fantasy. You're following Callie, who's basically in like modern day LA, but she is a siren, so she's half human, half siren, so she has this ability to like sing and make people do what she wants, but it's limited and she can't use it all the time because magic is kind of forbidden. But she also works as a private investigator to kind of solve crimes or solve these like disputes, what have you, but she can also coax things out of them because she's a siren, which is a really cool aspect of this. But it picks up when she is young because there's this Fae person called the Bargainer, who's like the devil himself. And when you make a deal with a bargainer, you have to repay him with a favor. And usually the favor is something horrible and more than you bargained for in the first place. But Callie calls upon him in a moment of desperation when she doesn't know what to do, and ends up over time, when she's like 17, over the year, I don't remember how long of a time, but over a short amount of time, she ends up racking up like 300 favors, something ridiculous, some crazy number. And he hasn't collected on any of them, and each favor is represented by a bead that is on a bracelet that wraps up her arm. And he always comes to collect, but he suddenly disappears. And after 7 years of silence from him, he comes to collect all of these favors. And also, there's like a murder mystery or mystery with a lot of sinister underlying tones and themes going on that she has to work on solving. And so while it is kind of the dark Fae portal thing that you see in ACOTAR, even though that's just the world, it's not necessarily a portal fantasy, Rapa Sonic has the portal Fae world, but it also has the dark mystery element to it, where it's very sinister, very scary to be honest, and dark. So if you liked this but you wanted something a little bit darker, a little bit more crime-like, like solving crime or solving a mystery, then I think you would really like Rapa Sonic. You do get to see the Fae magic and the Fae world and kind of what comes to play when it comes to that. But there's just a super dark underlying force to this that is creepy. And I think you would really like it. It's darker and more adult, I would say, than ACOTAR. But if you liked that, I think you would enjoy this as well. Well, that's the last this or that we're going to do today. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully this gave you some ideas of some things to read. I would love to know if you have any books that are like this or that's for me. Like, you know, I read Carnival, then I should read this book. I would love to know, so please comment down below and leave me any recommendations because I would love to know. But for now, that is it for today's video. Please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time. Stay safe and caffeinated. Bye.